everybody, it's Romania Black, and so we're on part 3 of Thousand Autumns, and I'm really excited because just as Wushi shows up to the Chunyun Temple, just as he shows up, that's when the chapters end. How dare this author? So we're going to be looking at the chapters 11 through 15 today, and then checking out audio drama episode 3, which will be really exciting. I'm recording this a little late at night, so I am getting decaf coffee. Also, I think decaf will be better for my voice because caffeine is not good for your voice, so we're sticking with decaf today. I've been drinking a lot of decaf coffee today because I was like, I don't want to get any more caffeine than I need, but I love the taste of coffee, so what can we do? But yeah, so we're looking at pages 102 to 148 in the digital copy, which I imagine is about the same here. And then checking out episode 3 of the audio drama. Definitely check out my April update video that will be coming out on April 1st to see how April is going to do with Thousand Autumns and see how the time frame is for that. But I am about to travel again. March and April have just been very busy months for Romania travel-wise, so this will be the last big trip that I have for a bit, but it is a very big trip. So I'm doing a lot of traveling, like 9 days worth in April, so just check that April update video to see when the parts after this one are coming out for the novel. But I'm really excited because it's been like a week since I've recorded part 2, and it felt so good to get back, and now I had to get caught up on the other things, and so, you know, I'm caught up now, and I was like, it's kind of windy outside, but I checked and there's not supposed to be a storm come through, so we're like, knock on wood. My dog is at my feet being like, throw my toy then, but in any case, I don't have any comments because I'm recording this before part 2 comes out on Patreon, but I do want to give a shout out, of course, to my Patreon for being so supportive, as well as to everybody that has subscribed on YouTube that like my videos. If you aren't subscribed, please subscribe. It's free and costs you nothing, as does liking this video or commenting down below. It helps the algorithm, it helps my channel to get more exposure, which we want more people to see all of this Don My goodness. So, and you can also check out my Patreon where people are super kind and supportive and help support me on the channel and also send me amazing things like Be Happy sending me this book. So if you want to join my Patreon, you are more than welcome to. I want to give a shout out to our philanthropy tier members who include Be Happy, our moderator, as well as Alex Cornejo, Alexandra Q, Dana, Damage3245, Daniel, as well as Devorin, Destiny Marie, Diana Williams, Ichu, Eric, Fisho, Ghostly Turnip, James, Lydia, or Lyndon, El Freya, Lou Genesis, as well as Murphy, Rast, Rose Jennison, Shimoyama, Sunspots, Translucent Men, Sean, Nicholas, Jason N, and Zero Anti-Zero. Thank you all so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. I really have to dedicate some time to watching these, watching the audio dramas as well as doing the chapters. So this evening worked out really well for that, but I'm so excited, y'all. I'm ready to dive into these chapters. I'm giddy. I have lots of energy, so we're not going to waste any more time. But we're going to get started. Oh man, Wushi showing up has me so elated. I hope you all are excited as well. So we're going to get started with chapters 11 through 15 of Thousand Autumns. Ooh. And we're going to get to that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 11, each with their own schemes. Oh, get me into this. Let's go. The young monk was disinclined to admire his hand. Instead, she was seized with terror. She had no idea where it had come from and was helpless to resist as it clamped onto her wrist. Ah! Sharp pain radiated from where she had been grabbed, forcing a cry of pain from her. Any man who had heard her would waver, even if he wasn't usually moved by a pretty face. Unluckily for her, she was wearing the plain and simple face of a monk, so the effect was less than ideal. Well, that and Wushi is perhaps not interested. On top of that, this particular man had a heart of stone. The moment her wrist shattered, she flew up into the air. He tossed her away. Her petite body slammed right into the pillar. It shook with the force of her impact, and the young monk fell to the ground, crying pitifully while hacking up a mouthful after mouthful of blood. One of her wrists was crushed, and the other hand had been pierced through by a dagger. Both were reduced to a miserable mosaic of flesh and blood. And yet, she seemed unconcerned. She was staring unswervingly at the man who'd injured her, her voice and volume slurred from the blood in her mouth. "Who are you?" The man in blue said, "No need to stare. San Jingjing and Yan Zhu together couldn't be sure of besting me, let alone you." Bai Rong's expression shifted. "May I ask for this distinguished master's esteemed name?" From the sidelines, another person already had the answer. "What are you doing here, sect leader Yan?" Sect leader Yan? Yan Wushi! Bai Rong's eyes flew open in disbelief. As the topmost disciple in the Heiwan sect, she'd often heard the name Yan Wushi. Though the three demonic sects had come from the same roots, they'd been at odds for a long time. And during the 10 years that Yan Wushi was off the scene, Heiwan sect took quite a few opportunities to make trouble for Huan Yu sect and kick them while they were down. Now that Yan Wushi was back in the Jiangju, the injuries he'd given her, she couldn't exactly call them unprovoked. Yan Wushi sneered. "Even if a bald donkey is invited, why can't I come?" Oh! As Yan Wushi spoke, a monk holding a jade chime walked slowly out from the darkness, but he looked nothing like the bald old donkey Yan Wushi had called him. "Oh, is that the abbot? Oh my god!" His face was as smooth as jade, and he couldn't have been far over 30 years old. His monk's robes were snow white and pristine, and even without speaking, he embodied the phrase, "a monk of the highest enlightenment." When he revealed himself, Murong Chun and Tuoba Liangje, the younger generation, showed little reaction. But Murong Chin and Yun Fuyi's expressions changed completely. "I never guessed that two such exalted and esteemed people would be found skulking around in the shadows, sneaking into Qi to steal the Zhuyang strategy. Buddhist Master Zhu Ting, the state preceptor of Zhou, and sect leader Yan, a grandmaster of his generation. You're trying to take advantage of the situation for your own gain? How brazen!" "The Murong patriarch need not be so agitated," said Buddhist Master Zhu Ting. "Ever since the Duke of Jin's death, His Majesty of Zhou has prohibited both Buddhism and Taoism. This humble monk has long ceased to be the state preceptor of Zhou. I only came here tonight at the request of an old friend. I hope that Deputy Leader Yun can give the item to me so that I may return it to its original owner. That way I can grant his long-cherished wish." Bai Rong spat out a frothy mouthful of blood and giggled. "I've never seen a monk so shameless. It's obvious you have designs on the treasure, yet you invent this old friend's request. Everyone knows that the Zhuyang strategy has been without owner since Tao Hongjing died. Tao Hongjing came to you in a dream, did he? And did he ask you to collect the Zhuyang strategy and then send it to him by burning it?" Buddhist Master Zhu Ting showed no emotion and put his hands together. It was as if he hadn't heard Bai Rong's words at all. With the addition of these two men, Murong Chen and Bai Rong didn't dare to venture another attack on Yun Fuyi, but Yun Fuyi didn't feel the slightest bit of relief. On the contrary, her mood sank even lower. Since Qi Fengge's passing, there had been no martial artist who had the capabilities to surpass the top 10. Buddhist Master Zhu Ting and Yan Wushi both ranked in the top 10. Zhu Ting's sheer power was too great to measure, but likely placed him in the top 3. Yan Wushi had been missing for many years, but the moment he'd reached surface within the Jiangyu, he'd thoroughly overpowered the martial expert of the Gok Turk's new generation, Kunye. And it was Kunye who defeated Mount Zhandu's mountain sect leader. Well, if you're going by that logic, then Yan Wuxi's stronger than Shen Qiao, but we don't know if that's exactly true. Anyway, Yun Fuyi couldn't handle either one of them. Who could have known that both would show up at once? Thinking of how their guild leader, Do Yanshin, had entrusted this mission to her put a bitter taste in her mouth. "Oh, girl, he's a bro. You're fine." It wasn't that she didn't want to try her best, but the way things went tonight was seriously unprecedented. All of these people were indeed at odds with each other, but they all shared a common goal: the Zhuyang strategy scroll that she had in her possession. Tao Hongjing's Zhuyang strategy was divided into 5 volumes: Conscious Mind, Corrupted Anima, Lost Soul, Clouded Essence, and Deluded Thought. Okay, we're getting into which ones there are. The 5 volumes were also matched to the 5 phases and corresponded to the vital organs of the human body. Oh! The complete set was a fusion of all 3 schools of thought and considered one of a kind, a book of legend. 3 volumes had been located, one in Zhou's inner palace, one on Zhangdu Mountain, and the last in Tiantai Sect. The whereabouts of the other 2 were unknown. With the scrolls they had in hand, Zhangdu Mountain and Tiantai Sect were secure in their places as 2 of the world's greatest martial arts sects, standing over the schools of Taoism and Buddhism respectively. It was by this very stroke of luck that Qi Fengge had become the #1 martial art expert in the world. Yes, his disciple Shen Qiao was rather disappointing, and he'd even gotten himself thrown off a mountain in defeat. But that was only because Shen Qiao's learning was unrefined. It had nothing to do with the Zhuyang strategy. If someone possessed just 1 volume and absorbed all it had to give, comprehended its subtleties, then that might be enough to propel them to Qi Fengge's level. They'd become the #1 martial artist in the world. Currently, the 3 volumes that had been accounted for were properly stored away by their respective sects. It would not be easy for anyone to take them by force. But the last 2 volumes were without an owner. There for the taking for those who were capable. Hence, when news quietly spread that Yun Fuyi was carrying one such Zhuyang strategy scroll, their group was beset by wave after wave of robbers. The Liyue Guild hadn't known the truth. They really did believe the 2 chests they transported were hiding some sort of rare treasure. When they heard that Yun Fuyi was carrying the Zhuyang strategy with her, they were all stunned, frozen, and yet to recover. In the silence of this many-sided stalemate, each party regarded the others with wary apprehension. Not one dared to make the first move. Murong Chen wanted to take the scroll by force, but he knew for certain that the moment he tried something, the monk Zhu Ting and Yan Wushi would move to stop him. Yun Fuyi stood at the center of this vortex, brimming with silent anxiety, but there was nothing she could do. Even if she could make it through tonight, tomorrow the news would spread further. She knew that more and more people would come after the treasure. If she didn't resolve this, even Mount Tai's Bijia sect and Linchuan Academy might suddenly catch the scent of blood in the water. But if that happened, how would the Liyue Guild ever know the peace again? She decided then and there to abandon her original plan, settling for the next best option. She chose the one person on the scene who looked the most trustworthy. The saying is true, she said. Only the capable achieve their aims. The Liyue Guild lacks the strength to hold on to the treasure. Instead of a blessing for us, it's a curse. I'm willing to hand over the Zhuyang strategy in exchange for peace. I asked the great master, if I give you the Zhuyang strategy scroll, can you guarantee the safety of me and my subordinates? Buddhist Master Zhu Ting chanted a name of Buddha and then said, Deputy Leader Yun is deeply principled. This humble monk will do his utmost to fulfill her request. Yun Fuyi went back and forth in her mind, weighing, considering, and then weighing again. Finally, she grit her teeth and fished a small bamboo tube out of her lapel. Hu Yan and Hu Yu craned their necks to gape at it, and even Bai Rong couldn't help but straighten up and pay attention. It was hard to imagine that this ordinary bamboo tube, thinner than a woman's wrist, could contain one of the Zhuyang strategy scrolls that everyone in the world desired. Since she was unable to fight with her injured hands, Bai Rong simply leaned against a pillar and watched the show. But Murong Chen had transformed into a shadow at once and was already targeting the tube. Before he could get close to Yun Fuyi, the wind from Buddhist Master Zhu Ting's palm fluttered to him from behind, carrying on it the unceasing rings of a jade chime. The sound could pierce right through to one's heart, and when it hit Murong Chen's ears, he was just as stricken as Yun Fuyi had been. His feet weighed 1,000 pounds or more, his chest went stiflingly tight, and he wanted to vomit. He knew this must be the jade chime's influence, so he blocked out the noise as well as he could and continued to move. He kept reaching out towards the tube in Yun Fuyi's hands. Yan Wushi moved to interfere as well, though no one could say why. His body barely moved, and without even a flicker of shadow, he was standing behind Murong Chen. He reached out, but it wasn't to stop Murong Chen from grabbing the tube. Instead, it was to stop Buddhist Master Zhu Ting. In the space of a moment, they exchanged no less than several dozen moves. Of course, CHEN GONG was dazzled watching this. He had no idea what was happening. Even rising stars like Hu Yan and Hu Yu were in a fog of confusion. CHEN GONG's head was spinning, but he couldn't make himself look away. While he was absorbed, Shen Qiao grabbed his shoulder and whispered, "Get up, go!" Typically, whenever Shen Qiao said one line, CHEN GONG would counter with 3, but just this once, he obeyed without a word. He set his jaw, struggling to stand up, and made a run for it. But just when he got into his feet, Chen Gong felt a strong force take a hold of him by the back and lift him up. His whole body soared high into the air. He screamed in a panic. He couldn't help it. When Yan Wushi tossed him down onto the roof, Chen Gong's legs gave out and he fell right to his knees, nearly tumbling right back down to the ground. He'd been terribly unlucky this entire night. His heart quailed in despair as he looked up and saw someone else was standing next to Yan Wushi. Shen Qiao had been dragged up there with him. Shen Qiao was even holding a bamboo tube, forced into his hand by Yan Wushi, and he was at a loss as to whether to hold on to it or to toss it away. Bewildered and helpless, he said, "We're only insignificant people rooming here for the night. We're completely related to the affairs of the Jianghu, unrelated to the affairs of the Jianghu. All debts have their debtors. So can sect leader Yan please not toy with us?" Yan Wushi was all smiles. "How can you say I'm toying with you? I'm giving you a huge advantage, something everyone under heaven desires. And right now, it's in your hands. Are you really not even the slightest bit happy?" Who could have dreamed that Yan Wushi would step in only to hand the bamboo tube over to two unrelated, utterly insignificant people? Immediately, everyone on the scene was staring at Shen Qiao with blazing intensity, as if trying with all their might to burn a hole right through him. Buddhist Master Zhu Ting frowned. Why is sect leader Yan involving outsiders in this? Yan Wushi fussed carelessly with a jade tassel tied to his robe. Don't you all want to see what's written in there? There's no point to all this fighting. It's better if everyone gets a share. Of course, if I were to read the scroll aloud, no one would believe me. And if you were to read it, I wouldn't believe you either. So I'll give it to him to read. That's better. How much he reads and how much you hear will depend on your own good fortune. Ah! Already! I also love that Shen Qiao, even though he can't see completely, he knows it's Yan Wushi. So it's like, ah! Chapter 12. Human nature. Many people had heard of Yan Wushi's unreasonable ways and the irrational steps he'd take. When Bai Rong heard his proposal, she was actually quite pleased. Tonight, she was the only one present from Heiwan sect. With the likes of Buddhist Master Zhu Ting and Yan Wushi around, she had absolutely no hope in getting her hands on the Zhu Yang strategy scroll, not to mention she'd also been injured. If they went along with Yan Wushi's suggestion, then as long as she heard a couple of words, she'd not only benefit her martial arts, she'd also have an explanation to give when she got home. With this in mind, she fixed her gaze on the bamboo tube in Shen Qiao's hand. Mu Rongqin's party had the same reaction. Only Buddhist Master Zhu Ting objected. Sect leader Yan, he said, this man is an outsider to the Jianghu. There are many who covet the Zhu Yang strategy but cannot obtain it. If the news spread that he recited the scroll today, he's sure to be attacked by someone no good, vicious rabble. You wouldn't have killed him, but he'd have died because of you. That's hypocritical of you, isn't it, you bald donkey? Said Yan Wushi lazily. You must have read the volume that's in the inner palace of Zhou when you were the state preceptor. And you used to be a disciple of Tiantai sect. Your master Hui Wen was still alive when you betrayed them. Considering how highly he regarded you, he probably let you read the Tiantai sect's volume 2. Add in this volume tonight and you'll have obtained 3 of the 5 volumes. The phrase, playing the victim after you get away with murder, comes to mind. Oh! Strangely enough, Mu Rongqin agreed with Yan Wushi. Great master, you are a virtuous and noble man. Since you don't wish to listen, then just leave. Why stand in everyone else's way? Why give such a meandering, long-winded speech? Is it because you're disappointed you can't have it all to yourself? Buddhist Master Zhu Ting sighed, but finally stopped talking. Yan Wushi simply pressed 2 fingers against a key acupoint in Shen Qiao's back, saying to him, read. To everyone else, it looked like Yan Wushi was threatening him. Only Shen Qiao knew that Yan Wushi actually just used some sort of secret method that instantly opened several of his blocked meridians. A warm stream of true qi flowed through his body, and the scene before his eyes gradually cleared. Finally, he could see just as well as anyone. No one present would suspect that Yan Wushi had saved Shen Qiao's life, but despite that connection between them, Shen Qiao was under no illusion that Yan Wushi held him in any special regard. He had his suspicions about what was really going on, and he felt his own regard for Yan Wushi grow colder at the thought. Resigned, Shen Qiao lifted the bamboo tube and then slowly unscrewed the cap and pulled out the rolled bamboo slip. The bamboo had been sliced incredibly thin. Once unrolled, it was almost a meter long. The words written on it were very small, but with his vision temporarily restored, Shen Qiao could just about read them by the light of the moon. Every gaze in the temple burned into him. If they could have burned in him in truth, Shen Qiao guessed that his body would be scorched to cinders. He squinted as he examined the words, and he slowly read them out one by one. The pancreas conceals the thought. Hoshin begets the deluded thought, while Jiantian begets integrity. As an ordinary person without any internal energy, his voice wasn't very loud, but most of the listeners present were anything but ordinary, so they could hear and understand completely. The writing on the bamboo slip eventually came to an end. No matter how slowly Shen Qiao read, within half an hour he was finished. His mouth was dry from speaking. He returned the bamboo slip to Yang Wushi, and Yang Wushi's hand withdrew from his back. The ocean of warmth vanished in an instant, and darkness engulfed Shen Qiao's vision once more. On top of that, his eyes began to ache, a searing pain like they'd been burned, perhaps because he's overtaxed them. He had to cover his eyes with one hand to steady himself, and using the bamboo cane with the other, bowing over at the waist as he panted. Yang Wushi took the slip and paid Shen Qiao no attention. He didn't speak a word, but with a shake of his sleeves and a flick of his hand, the roll of bamboo instantly burst into a fine powder and scattered into the air. Everyone was dumbfounded. Murong Chun was fiery and young. He couldn't help but yell, "Well, the Zhuzhang strategy was incredibly precious and you destroyed it!" "Only something that's gone can be called precious," said Yang Wushi coolly. "He's already read it. However much you remember is your own problem." Murong Jun stared at him, huffing and puffing, speechless. Yang Wushi dusted off his hands, flicking the powder that had fallen from his sleeves. Then he turned around and left without the slightest care. Few people in the world could have stopped him. Buddhist Master Zhu Ting didn't move, and so the others could only watch as his silhouette faded into the darkness. Ignoring her injuries, Bai Rong left just after him. Not to chase after Yang Wushi, but to quickly find a place where she could write down everything she remembered. Murong Jun and Tuoba Liangzhe both looked at Murong Chen. He thought it over for a minute and then he made his decision. "Let's go!" Without another glance at Yun Fuyi and her people, the three of them turned around and left as well. Buddhist Master Yu Zhu Ting let out a quiet sigh. "Deputy Leader Yun had a real scare tonight," he said to her. "Please give my humble regards to Guild Leader Do." "Oh! He was part of the group who had gotten in her way, but now that the scroll was destroyed, Yun Fuyi had no interest in castigating him. "Take care, Great Master," she said coolly. Once Buddhist Master Zhu Ting was gone, she had Hu Yan and Hu Yu help the two hall masters to their feet, and then said to Shen Qiao and CHEN GONG, "You suffered an undeserved disaster tonight, and it was all caused by the Liyue Guild. I apologize deeply for this. I don't know where the two of you are heading next, but if it's convenient and on our way, we can escort you a short distance." Before, Shen Gong would have been elated at her offer, but the extraordinary events of that night had showed him the meaning of the phrase, "always a better person, always a higher sky." His enthusiasm had waned quite a bit. Still, he didn't want to lose his opportunity to enter the Zhangyu and stewed over how to answer. Next to him, Shen Qiao took the chance to speak first. "Thank you for your kindness," he said. "We were planning to head south and seek help from our relatives. Never did we expect to encounter something like this. We're very afraid now and only wish to hasten our journey to arrive at the southern border as soon as possible. We're not people of the Jianghu and we don't want to involve it in our affairs, so please forgive us." Yun Fuyi mused. "Do you remember the contents of what you just read now?" she asked. Shen Qiao shook his head. "We've been poor since childhood. My cousin cannot read or write, and I myself only have a rough understanding. I've never read any classics, and my eyes are poor. I don't know what mystic technique that master used, but just now when he pressed his hand against my back, I was able to see the words upon the bamboo slip. Once I finished and he removed his hand, though, I couldn't see anything clearly, let alone recall it." I'm amazed that Shen Qiao is lying right now. I think he's lying. Interesting. Yun Fuyi noticed then that his eyes indeed had something wrong with them. They were unfocused, the whites of them faintly blue. Knowing that he wasn't lying, she was a little sorry she'd asked. Very well. We must set out tonight, so we'll be leaving momentarily. If the two of you ever find yourselves in need of urgent help, you can go to the UA Guild branch within the city and tell them you know me. My name is Yun Fuyi. Shen Qiao thanked her gratefully. CHEN GONG looked at him and then followed suit. Yun Fuyi's party did not linger long. They didn't even bother with the 2 chests they'd brought. Hu Yan and Hu Yu took the injured hallmasters, and they all rushed to the city that very night. In no time at all, the large temple was emptied and desolate. As he watched their figures vanish before him, CHEN GONG patted Shen Qiao gently. His voice still low, as if he was afraid of being overheard, he said, "When she asked us to leave with them just now, why didn't you agree? Wouldn't it be safer?" Shen Qiao's eyes still ached terribly, but he smiled despite the pain. "Then why didn't you stop me when I answered them just now and say you wanted to go with them?" CHEN GONG hesitated for a moment. "You're more trustworthy than they are." Shen Qiao sighed. Deputy Leader Yun probably invited us along because she was afraid she wouldn't remember everything she'd heard. She hoped we could help her write down the contents of the scroll. The outside world is sure to hear the news about what happened here tonight, and they'll try every trick in the book to get a copy of the scroll. If we went with them, we'd be the first to be abandoned in the face of real danger. Understanding dawned on CHEN GONG. "Well, no wonder! I was wondering why that bitch was being so kind all of a sudden," he cursed. "Her heart was really full of bad intentions the entire time. If you hadn't stopped me, I really would have gone with them." "I'm only guessing," said Shen Qiao. "Since the Zhuyang strategy is so precious, they're terrified they'll forget it. So they'll definitely find a place to stop and write it from memory first. Whatever they write down will be highly sought after. Everyone will try to get their hands on it. We're not people of the Jianghu. If we travel with them, we gain nothing. We'd only get caught up in their disasters." CHEN GONG hung his head, depressed. "You're right. I used to think that the Liu Guild branch in Funing County looked so mighty and grand, so I wanted to join them, but after tonight, I'm letting go of that fantasy. I don't know a scrap of martial arts, and even if I did get in, I'd only be doing odd jobs for the rest of my life." The two of them headed back inside together. Less than half an hour had passed since the incident, and the pain in Shen Qiao's eyes had finally let up a bit. But when he opened them, he couldn't see a thing. They'd returned to their worst state, just as they'd been when he'd first woken up after his fall. Shen Qiao pondered the move Yan Wushi had used on his back on the roof. His vision would almost certainly need several months or even years to return to normal, but Yan Wushi had used some technique that got them working perfectly in an instant. The result allowed him to have a temporary reprieve from the dark, but it would cost him an even longer recovery. A wry smile came across Shen Qiao's face. He'd seen firsthand now how cold and heartless that man was. As for why Yan Wushi had saved him, that was probably not out of the goodness of his heart either. But was it really just a coincidence that Yan Wushi had showed up at the temple tonight? CHEN GONG tugged on his sleeve. "Say," he said, his tone carrying a slight tremble, "that young monk back there was someone else in disguise, and then the temple's original abbot and the monks, were they already silenced?" Shen Qiao didn't answer. Perhaps that spoke for itself, for CHEN GONG's face paled and he went quiet too. He'd once prided himself on his fearlessness. Now, for the first time, he became deeply aware of the importance of strength. In a world like this, without the necessary strength, you could end up as prey at any moment. You could die for no reason whatsoever. The temple's old abbot and the 2 young monks were indeed dead. Ha! What a way to start out the next part! Their corpses were in an old abbot's room, and the murderer hadn't even bothered to cover them up, just left them sprawled awkwardly where they'd fallen. When CHEN GONG saw them, his knees went weak with fear. He couldn't muster the strength to properly arrange the bodies, and instead, he simply crawled his way back out, all the way until he saw Shen Qiao. Only then did he calm down a little bit. Although Shen Qiao was blind once more, he could still give orders with some sense of strength just by sitting there quietly. With trembling lips, CHEN GONG asked him, "Did that woman who disguised herself as a monk kill them? Why did she have to kill them? She was so powerful she could have just stopped them from moving or talking." "Perhaps this is just her style of doing things." Shen Qiao was silent for a moment. "There are some people who need no reason to act. They relish in having power over other people's lives and believe that their whims should override what matters to others. Shen Gong stared blankly at the ground. The dried blood on the old abbot's body still haunted him. What happened tonight had completely upended all that he'd seen and heard for the past 10-some years of his life, and he was still neck-deep in shock. He couldn't return to his senses for a long time. I must not become someone who other people will butcher and slaughter. I will become someone with power over others. Ooh. As Shen Gong thought this, he recalled those great masters he'd seen tonight. There had been the calm and collected Buddhist master Zhu Ting, who was untouched by the mundane world. Then there was the ostentatious and volatile Yuan Wushi. This man who did as he pleased stirred a greater admiration in Shen Gong. Oh! Shen Qiao didn't know the boy's thoughts and only assumed he'd been frightened silly. He patted Shen Gong's shoulders. Meetings are ordained by fate, he said gently. The old abbot lent us this temple to stay in, and that too was a kindness. Tomorrow, let's you and I bury them together. Shen Gong let out a long breath. All right. Oh, I'm liking this little bit of Shen Gong query here. I'm liking that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Chapter 13. Wow, that chapter was really short. Oh, buddy. Oh, really short chapter. A dangerous encounter. Early the next morning, they hastily buried the abbot and the 2 monks and then entered the city straight away. After what had happened the night before, Shen Gong had become nervous and jumpy like a bird that started at the sight of a bow. He was unwilling to stay in the city even a moment too long when he saw the local Liu oh my god, these words, Liu Guild's branch signboard in the distance. He refused to move any closer and pulled Shen Qiao in the other direction. He didn't know whether to laugh or to cry at the boy. No one will notice us, said Shen Qiao. They're interested in other people, not us, so don't worry so much. Just then a laugh sputtered from up above them atop a wall. I think his concern is somewhat warranted myself. Although the light was so dim last night, I failed to notice how handsome this gentleman was. I almost passed you right by. The voice was sweet and delicate, not like I just did. But more importantly, it was alarmingly familiar. Shen Gong shuddered with recognition. Lifting his head, he saw a young girl sitting atop the wall, a dark-haired and clothed in red. Her hair was bound in a bun with a golden hoop, and she was smiling right at them. A lovely, charming smile. Other than that voice, nothing about her resembled the young monk from the night before. On any other day in his life, if Shen Gong came face to face with such a beautiful girl while walking down the street, he would have been eyeing her up. But he remembered the 3 dead monks at the temple, and the state he'd been found them in, and he went cold all over and couldn't muster the courage to give her a second look. Bai Rong was all smiles. Why so scared? Shouldn't you be happy to reunite with an old friend? I came here specifically to find you. Oh, there she be. Oh, nice. I like how they made Shen Gong look in this. He actually looks like a 16-year-old boy. Looks very young. And I love that Shen Qiao's like, not interested. I mean, I love her Donghua design very much, but she looks amazing there. Love that. Love it. Since Shen Qiao couldn't see where she was precisely, he could only cup his hands in greeting in the direction of her voice. On what business does this maiden seek us out? Bai Rong pouted. Maiden? How dismally formal. My last name is Bai. I'm called Bai Rong. It's also named for the peony flower, so you can call me Little Peony. Oh, that does sound sweet. As she spoke, she leapt from the wall and was in front of them in a flash. Bai Rong seemed more interested in Shen Qiao, even reaching out a hand to touch his face. Just before her fingertips reached him, Shen Qiao seemed to sense them and took 2 steps back. Bai Rong giggled and got straight to the point. You and I were both there last night. One of you read out the scroll while the other listened from beginning to end, so both of you must remember its contents. Now, I want to write everything down that was on the scroll, but there are some lines I just don't remember all too well. Hence, I need your help. As for a reward once we're finished, whether you desire riches or beauties, you'll get whatever you wish for. She drawled her final words into a sing-song tune, coquettish with a touch of flirtatiousness. It was enough to make any man's heart waver. Shen Gong's ears went hot and he was about to agree when the hand on his shoulder pressed down hard. He came back to his senses and quickly started shaking his head like a rattle drum. I can't read or write. I love that it can make any man's heart waver, but not Shen Qiao's. You found the wrong people, added Shen Qiao. He can't read, and I'm blind. Last night I just recited the scroll, but I didn't take in any of it. Once I was finished, I forgot what it said. I'm afraid that we can't help you. Bai Rong smiled gleefully. You're all panicky right now, so of course you can't remember. But once you come with me and give it some careful thought, perhaps you'll be able to recall a great deal. Can you really say no to such a pretty face? She didn't wait for an answer, reaching out to grab both of them straight away. Alarm bells blared in Chen Gong's mind. His body wanted to run, but for some reason, when he saw her white and slender hand reach towards him, all the strength dropped from it. He could only watch as the hand brushed his shoulder and his legs went weak and he collapsed onto the ground. Shimei looks so excited. Is she about to kill someone again? Oh! Is she about to kill someone again? A youthful face, extraordinarily beautiful, accompanied this voice that sounded so very old. The man alighted from the wall, soft as a feather, and then smiled at Bai Rong. Her expression shifted a touch. You so rarely see your Xizhong, he said. Isn't Shimei happy to see me? Reluctantly putting Shen Qiao and Shen Gong aside, Bai Rong focused her energies on dealing with the uninvited guest. What is Xizhong saying? It took me just a moment to recover from the joy and surprise of seeing you again after so long. Okay, it's Ho! I got really excited thinking it might be Yang Wushi because I'm always wanting Yang Wushi to be in the scene. But no, it's Ho. It's this guy. It's this bitch. Huo Zhijing looked at her, the shadow of a smile upon his face. His gaze swept past Chen Gong and landed on Shen Qiao, regarding him with deep interest. Such a handsome gentleman you have there. Since you're going to kill him anyway, Shimei, why not give me the skin of his face first? Then you can kill him. Bai Rong moved smoothly in front of Shen Qiao. Very funny, Xizhong. I wasn't thinking of killing them. In fact, why is Xizhong here? You couldn't have come all this way just to catch up with me. I heard that Shimei had the opportunity of a lifetime last night. Since I happened to be passing through, I stopped by to check it out for myself. What are you playing at, Xizhong? Your Shimei can't understand you at all. Huo Zhijing gave her a slight snort. Last night, outside a temple on the outskirts of the city, the Liyue Guild appeared with a scroll of the Zhu Yang strategy. And you were right there on the scene. Word is, before Yang Wushi destroyed the scroll, he made someone read it aloud. With Shimei's wits and intelligence, surely you wrote it down to hand over to our Shizun, yes? Bai Rong stuck out her tongue, pouting like a little girl. Considering how filial I am, of course something like this has got to go to Shizun. Surely you didn't swoop in here to steal the credit from me once you heard the news. I'm afraid I can't let that happen. Here's a good idea. How about you give it to me for safekeeping, and we'll head back to hand it over to Shizun together. That way, we need not the fear of you losing it. Bai Rong laughed. Does Xizhong take me for a fool? Huo Zhijing also laughed. Distrusting your Xizhong like this, it makes him so sad. The two martial siblings were laughing as they spoke, but each word concealed a knife, and both had their eyes on each other's openings and weaknesses. Bai Rong dared not to relax for a moment. Even when she knew Shen Qiao was escaping with Chen Gong, she paid them no heed. All her attention was focused on Huo Zhijing, afraid of falling to his ploy in a moment of carelessness. Huo Zhijing raised an eyebrow. They've left. Isn't Shimei going to go chase after them? Bai Rong was still smiling brightly. Xizhong is more important to me. The words were spoken with deep, lingering affection, but in their hearts, both of them knew it was a lie. Chen Gong didn't even know how Shen Qiao had pulled him up into the run. He couldn't see well, and even with his bamboo cane, he still stumbled and tripped as he went. Chen Gong had no strength left in him and could only give directions as he was dragged along behind him. After they'd run for about half an hour, Chen Gong finally said, panting, Stop running. I can't run any further. Shen Qiao slowed his steps, but the look on his face stayed just as severe. He walked in the direction of the nearest inn. Chen Gong hastily asked, shouldn't we leave the city? Leave the city right away and run. That way the demon woman can't catch us. They're probably expecting us to leave the city too. All the more reason we can't. The city is full of people, so it'll be difficult for them to find us. First, we'll stay at an inn for the night, then tomorrow we'll look for a chance to leave. With that man around, her attention will be off of us for a while. They entered the inn and asked for a room. Chen Gong noticed the heavy exhaustion on Shen Qiao's face, despite how briskly he'd just been walking. He remembered that Shen Qiao's body was much weaker than his own, and how he normally had to stop and gasp for air every few steps. Feeling a little bad for him, Chen Gong said, "I'll sleep on the floor tonight, and you take the bed." Normally, Shen Qiao would humbly refuse, but now he was truly depleted. Ever since Yang Wushi infused him with true qi and he'd overexerted his vision, his body had gone soft. Up until then, he'd been forcing himself to push through it, but now that he'd relaxed, his whole body felt unsteady and on the edge of collapse. Chen Gong was confused. They're martial siblings, Shizhong and Shimi, but so how come they were acting like enemies? That man also was kind of strange. His voice was old, but his face was so young. Shen Qiao rubbed at his temples. That's because he used a technique called Stolen Sky and Counterfeit Sun. What does that mean, Stolen Sky and Counterfeit Sun? He thought to himself that the name sounded pretty imposing. It's a face-changing technique, says Shen Qiao. You skin off a person's face, and then use a special technique to fuse it with your own. That way you can maintain your youthful beauty for all eternity. Those two are both difficult characters to deal with. If it hadn't been for their bickering, we wouldn't have been able to escape today. So how can there be a technique so horrible? Chen Gong blurted out. His hair was standing on end from fear. Shen Qiao couldn't force himself to keep going on any longer. He simply laid down on his side, fully clothed, with a slight curl to his back and a small frown on his stark white face. He looked like a man on death's door. When they'd first started traveling together, Chen Gong had been a little worried that Shen Qiao might collapse at any moment. Later he realized that Shen Qiao just looked like that every day, so he'd become accustomed to it. Something occurred to Chen Gong and he asked, "Well, hey, didn't you say you can't remember anything? Then how'd you know that guy used a face-changing technique?" "Oh," said Shen Qiao, "sometimes I can remember a little." The corner of Chen Gong's mouth twitched. "Go to sleep. We need to wake up early tomorrow." Obviously, Chen Qiao wasn't willing to say any more. He rolled over and put his back to him. There was nothing Chen Gong could do but lie down as well. That night, he had a nightmare. He dreamt that his face had been skinned off and replaced with the wrinkled countenance of an old man. When he looked in the mirror, he could no longer recognize himself. In the end, he woke from the start in sheer terror of it. Then he looked around and saw the sun had already risen and the bed was completely empty. Shen Qiao was gone. Shocked, Chen Gong leapt to his feet, his thoughts spiraling. When he touched the bed, he found no residual warmth, and right as he was struggling with whether or not to dash out and search for him, Shen Qiao pushed open the door and walked in. Chen Gong breathed a sigh of relief. "Where did you go?" Although he'd never admitted over the course of their travels together, Chen Gong had gotten used to having Shen Qiao around. An outside observer might think that Shen Qiao's blindness and poor health was an inconvenience to Chen Gong, who'd have to help him out of all the time, but in truth, it was Chen Gong who relied on Shen Qiao for many things. It was thanks to Shen Qiao that they'd been spared many detours. Shen Qiao closed the doors, and softly he said, "Let's part ways today." Chen Gong froze and then jumped to his feet. "Why?" "Once Bai Rong and her Xizhong have finished arguing with each other, there's a chance they'll come looking for us. As for the Liyue Guild, although I dissuaded them when they wanted us to travel together, they may very well regret it." He paused and sighed. "There's also that Murong Chen. He's likely a martial expert who belongs to the imperial court. It would be easy for him to mobilize government forces to track us down. Although one of us is blind and the other one illiterate, the temptation presented by the Zhiyong strategy is irresistible. Many people spend their entire lives in tireless pursuit of it, and to end up empty-handed and we were able to listen to its contents? Compared to everyone else who was there, we're the softest of persimmons, the weakest and easiest target. Any person from the Jianghu could end our lives." "Well, then what do we do?" Chen Gong stammered. "We didn't mean to listen. Who'd want to listen to something that convoluted?" "An ordinary man bears no sin, but holding a precious stone will cast him as a sinner. Last night they saw us together, so that's the impression they received. Today, for our sake and safety, we must go our separate ways." Chen Gong was at a loss for a moment. Finally, he came to see that it was a hopeless problem and this was the only solution. If it came down to a fight, they could be knocked to the ground by a single palm strike. A sense of helplessness welled up inside of him and then twisted into an even deeper despair. Chen Gong hated his own powerlessness, but there was nothing he could do. "Very well," he said reluctantly and looked at Shen Qiao, "but can you make it on your own?" Shen Qiao smiled. "Why not? Didn't you see me doing well on my own back in Funing County? After some thought, Chen Gong conceded, but his mood didn't lift at all. Then after we leave the city, will we ever see each other again? That's up to fate, said Shen Qiao. Will you still go to the Liu Guild? Chen Gong shook his head. He was very certain. That deputy leader already recognizes me. If I go to the Liu Guild, I'll just be walking myself into a trap. Everyone knows I've heard the contents of that stupid scroll, so they definitely try to pry something out of me. Then where will you go? Chen Gong was depressed. I'll take things one step at a time. Maybe when I run out of money, I'll settle down then and there. And in the end, I gotta eat. The Liu Guild is a major organization after all, so their threshold for entry is high. Even if you manage to get in, they might not treat you very well. Why not seek out a small guild that's upright and just? With your intelligence, I'm sure you'll find success very quickly. Whatever, I just don't want to head south anymore. I want to go north instead and go check out Yecheng. I've heard it's really booming, so there should be a lot of chances to get ahead. Chen Gong said this without much enthusiasm. He didn't have many belongings to pack, and all he had with him were 2 pieces of old clothing. Once he'd fastened his sack, he could leave. Before he did, he looked back and saw Shen Qiao sitting there quietly, bamboo cane in front of him. Although his eyes lacked any life, his face was turned in Chen Gong's direction, as if to see him off. For some reason, Chen Gong felt a lump in his throat. You take care. Shen Qiao nodded. You as well. They were 2 people who'd met by chance, like drifting duckweed. Fate ordained that they travel together, and now, as fate would have it, they were parting ways. It was a remarkably common situation, but the teenage Chen Gong had not yet learned to take such things in stride. Shortly after Chen Gong left, Shen Qiao packed his clothes and prepared to leave the city. He had picked the south gate as to not bump into Chen Gong. The 2 of them were going their separate ways, and they would make each of them less of a target, but Shen Qiao had other reasons as well. Oh, I'm liking this sneaky Shen Qiao. Come on now, Shen Qiao. Let's see where this goes. On the way out of the city, Chen Gong was in a constant state of apprehension. Only when he saw that no one had tailed him or headed him off was his mind finally put at ease. Huai Province was close to Zhou and was frequented by merchants traveling back and forth from one another. During the day, people even gathered outside the city gates, picking through the wares for sale, their shouts rising and falling in turn, making for quite a lively scene. Initially, Chen Gong had been so preoccupied with avoiding these powerful characters that he hadn't had time to give his surroundings a close look. Now that he found himself in a busy market, a teenage youth's love of watching the hustle and bustle reared up again. I love the way that's phrased. He didn't dare wander about it too much. After a quick look around and buying 2 steaming pieces of flatbread for the road, fresh off the stove, he followed the main road north. After 100 or so steps, he heard a stampede of horses' hooves, interspersed with the sounds of screaming and crying. Chen Gong quickly turned around and saw several people charging from out of the city at full speed, running in his direction. Behind him followed a large troop of men atop horses, armed with bows and arrows, galloping wildly. He didn't know what was going on, and he stood there blankly for a moment, watching all the people draw closer and closer. The men on horseback had already drawn their bows and nocked their arrows, preparing to shoot in his direction. Seeing that, Chen Gong was scared out of his stupor and instinctively began running as well, his mind still in a muddle, bewildered that such a scene could suddenly pop up when everything had been so perfectly fine a moment before. He wasn't the only one. The commoners at the city gates were also in complete chaos, fleeing in all the directions, screaming over and over again in alarm. Chen Gong did not look back. He sprinted forward like his life was on the line. His luck was seriously abysmal, he thought to himself. Things like this happened wherever he went. After he'd been running for a while, there came the sound of an arrow whistling through the air. It whizzed past Chen Gong's ear and sliced into a thick brush right in front of him. He went weak in the knees and almost fell straight down onto his face. From behind him came intermittent screams and sounds of people falling, along with the distant drifting laughter of men on horseback who sounded very pleased. He even heard someone fawning, "The commandery prince is truly a great archer. This must be what is meant by piercing a willowy from 100 places and not a single shot missed." The laughter stopped abruptly as the man responsible abruptly raised his voice. "The fastest runner in there! Don't target him, any of you! He's mine!" Who could run faster than Chen Gong? No one! All of a sudden he understood what was going on. Most dignitaries loved hunting, but some were especially perverse. What they loved to hunt weren't animals, but people. They'd release prisoners and slaves and command them to run with all their might and shoot arrows at them with no regard whether they lived or died. They called it human hunting. Chen Gong had only heard about it after he left Funing County. At the time, he'd found it outlandish and clicked his tongue at the idea. But now that it was actually happening to him, exactly like a tale from a storyteller, it wasn't amusing in the slightest. The one title that we get here that is the Commandery Prince is a noble title that could be conferred to both members of the royal family and trusted officials. They ruled over commanderies, which were typically a type of administrative region similar to counties. Knowing now that the stories were true, his heart pounded like a drum. It was about to thump out of his chest. All of a sudden, Chen Gong stopped and turned around, prostrating himself on the ground. He begged loudly, "Oh, please have mercy, Your Excellency! Please have mercy! I'm not prey, much less a prisoner or a slave. I'm a good citizen!" "So what? If this prince wishes to kill you, he can." The man at the head of the hunting party laughed, utterly unconcerned. When he got a good look at Chen Gong, though, he made a sound of surprise. "You! Raise your head so I can see you." Steeling himself, Chen Gong looked up, fear and dread written all over his face. But TIPO, was amused by what he saw. "Your complexion's a little dark, but it's still quite delicate, and your limbs look supple too. If I were to spare your life, what would you give me in return?" Chen Gong was still in a muddle. "This lowly commoner is willing to be a beast of burden for your esteemed self, or is happy to be banished by your excellency." TIPO chuckled. "Very well. Someone come and take him back and clean him for me." "I don't like where that's headed." I don't like where that's headed. Chen Gong, do you realize where that's headed? I don't know if you realize where that's headed. Oh, Chen Gong had left home at a young age and was by no means ignorant of the ways of the world. When he saw how the gathered crowd looked at him with strange expressions and put together what the man had said, he'd figured it out. He'd been taken in as a male concubine. Male concubines were not uncommon in Qi, especially in the upper echelons of the nobility. As the few generations of Qi emperors had taken both men and women as partners, how sexually progressive. Since subordinates followed their leaders' examples, the lower levels of the nobles became quite interested in homosexuality as well. Hey, you know what? If all these nobles are curious about bisexuality, who are we to stop them? What is this progressivism in this novel? What is this Don My Times? Is this why the censors went on vacation? Is this why they left? Because they were told to go. Chen Gong wasn't aware that he caught the eye of the most famous official, the most favored of the Emperor of Qi himself, but nonetheless he felt his soul about to flee in terror. He kowtowed and exclaimed, "Oh, spare me, Your Excellency! There's nothing charming about me. I don't want to go back with you." TIPO's expression went dark. Chen Gong's heart thundered in his chest. He'd picked up a couple moves from Shen Qiao, but here he stood against a large troop of men on horses, of armed men on horses, their eyes ablaze. His rough, scanty martial arts would be completely useless. He'd probably be pierced through by 10,000 arrows before he even took one step. Once, Chen Gong had thought himself fearless. At this moment, he felt childish and ridiculous. He hadn't been afraid before because he was always in situations that he knew how to handle. But now he was terrified. Because when it came to these influential bigwigs before him, he knew nothing of. Chen Gong didn't know who they were exactly to understand that he must absolutely not provoke them. An attendant laughed from the sidelines. "Commandery Prince, this lowly one has never seen anyone so tactless before." Another person echoed him. "Truly, this boy isn't even especially beautiful. It's his great fortune that the Commandery Prince took a liking to him, and yet he still has the gall to refuse. He might as well be shot dead on the spot." TIPO's eyes narrowed, and he slowly raised the bow and arrow in his hands. "Your Excellency, please allow this lowly one to explain." Chen Gong's mind buzzed and then abruptly went blank. With no time to think it through, he blurted out, "This lowly one lacks charm and is unworthy of such high regard from your Excellency, but this lowly one knows a man. That man is much better looking than I am. No, he's better looking than all the people your Excellency has with you combined." "Are you throwing Shen Qiao under the bus?" All those following behind TIPO were beautiful men. When they heard Chen Gong, "Oh my God, TIPO has his own pit crew." When they heard Chen Gong, they burst into laughter, ridiculing him for being rustic and unworldly. "Look at this hillbilly. He actually thinks he's seen a man more beautiful than us." TIPO didn't speak. He already had a white-plumed arrow in his hand, and he seemed ready to nock it and shoot. Qin Gong was drenched in a cold sweat. This was a critical life and death moment. He couldn't afford to have second thoughts. He's right here in the city, he said loudly. We've only just parted ways. If your excellency doesn't believe me, I can take you to him. He's a natural beauty, but his eyes don't work so well. He's a blind man, so I'm afraid that your excellency will find him unsatisfactory. When he heard Qin Gong say the man was blind, Mu Tipo finally took a little interest. Come to think of it, I've never played with a blind man before, he said. I suppose that means when I tie him to the bed, I won't have to blindfold him? His frivolous tone drew a wave of low, sinister laughter. Now Qin Gong saw just how loathsome these men were, but he'd already said what he'd said, and it was too late for regrets. He thought to himself, Shen Qiao is more skilled than him, so perhaps he'd be able to beat these people back. Or perhaps by the time they got there, Shen Qiao would have left already. This chaotic jumble flashed through his mind as he stayed frozen in place, unmoving. His attendant rode up to him, chin held high. Hurry up and take us there! Qin Gong gritted his teeth. Your Excellency, in truth, the man is in poor health, and even though he's good looking, I'm afraid it will spoil your mood. Isn't that even better? Mu Tipo said blithely. A sickly man can be enjoyable in his own way. If he dies while I'm playing with him, it'd be because of his poor health, and it couldn't be blamed on me. But if you don't want to lead us to him, then you can be a substitute. You're healthy, so it'll be fine no matter how I play with you. I'll strip you bare and let my pet wolf dogs play with you. How about that? They just happen to be in heat now, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to find mates for them. Qin Gong's eyes went wide. He'd never imagined that the world would be so cruel and have such savage people in it. Mu Tipo's threats left him trembling all over, and he could no longer muster up the will to resist. Don't blame me, Shen Qiao. I was forced to, he thought to himself. Oh my God, what the fudge? Story. Meng Shi. What? What? Qin Gong led the large troop of men on horseback into the city. When they arrived at the inn, only half a day had passed since he'd left. The innkeeper still remembered him. When he saw that Qin Gong had returned and saw who he was with, he dared not ignore the boy and rushed to welcome him. This is... Qin Gong couldn't help but look back at Mu Tipo, who was frowning and covering his nose at the sight of the innkeeper's humble interior. He sent a few attendants inside with Shen Qiao to keep an eye on him. The man who stayed with me, is he still here? Qin Gong motioned at his eyes. His eyes aren't very good, and he has a bamboo cane. Yes, he's here, the innkeeper quickly replied. He's still in his room. He hasn't come down. Qin Gong's heart filled with joy, swiftly followed by a small wave of guilt. But the guilty feeling didn't last very long before it was interrupted. Mu Tipo's attendant frowned. What are you dawdling for? He yelled. Take us up there! The man was coated in powder, and the scent of something pretentious and gaudy seemed to waft from him. Qin Gong didn't even want to look at him more than once, but he had no way to defy his words. He had no choice but to bring everyone upstairs, although they went very slowly. Part of him had hoped that Shen Qiao had, in fact, left, but another part hoped he was still there. Qin Gong led the group upstairs and knocked. After 3 knocks, a familiar voice came from inside. Who is it? Qin Gong couldn't have said what he felt in that moment. He swallowed and said, Oh, it's me. Qin Gong, why did you return? Quickly, come in. Shen Qiao was a little surprised, but his voice was as calm as ever. Full of conflicting emotions, Qin Gong felt the guilt rise in him again. Why aren't you going in? Impatient, Mu Tipo's attendant gave him a hard shove. Qin Gong stumbled forwards, ramming the door open along the way. Shen Qiao was sitting by the window with his face turned slightly towards it, as if enjoying the scenery outside. But Qin Gong knew that since that night at the temple, Shen Qiao had not been able to see anything at all. Pah, so that's your so-called beauty? He's not much. The attendant's words ground to a halt when Shen Qiao turned his head towards them, and it became difficult to continue. Mu Tipo had weighted himself into impatience and decided to come upstairs personally. His eyes lit up when he saw Shen Qiao. Mu Tipo came from a poor background, but then his mother gained influence, while he himself ended up close friends with the emperor, and through these associations he was able to live a life of extravagance. His origins meant he placed a great deal of importance on dress. He wouldn't let anyone in his sight whose clothes and adornments lacked the proper splendor. Shen Qiao's clothes were of plain materials, and his hair was pulled into a simple bun. He didn't even have a jade pin. It was only held in place by a strip of sky blue ribbon, the same color as his clothing. And yet Mu Tipo couldn't tear his eyes away from him. Those rough garments did nothing to conceal Shen Qiao's overwhelmingly beauty. When Shen Qiao turned his face over at him expressionless, Mutipo's mouth went dry. He could barely restrain himself from going right up and pushing him down, ripping open those clothes and ravaging him. "CHEN GONG, whom did you bring here with you?" When he heard that gently bewildered voice, Mutipo's excitement swelled. What would this man taste like, he wondered, with his brows pinched and crying out. Mutipo had already decided to hold this man here in Huai province first until he played with him enough. Then he'd send him to Emperor Gao Wei of Qi. Gao Wei was like him. He always loved playing with unusual things. If Mutipo sent this blind beauty to him, the emperor would undoubtedly be very pleased. "What is your name?" asked Shen Qiao. Shen Qiao knit his brows, but he did not answer. He only said, "CHEN GONG?" Oh my gosh! Chapter 14, Betrayal! Oh! CHEN GONG knew that Shen Qiao couldn't see him, but he still shrank from his line of sight. Mutipo chortled at this. "CHEN GONG told me there was a beauty here, one 100 times more beautiful than all of my men. At first I didn't believe him. I thought this kid hadn't seen enough of the world and was only spewing nonsense, so I came with him to take a look. But now I've seen you. I know he wasn't exaggerating." Shen Qiao was silent, his expression blank. Mutipo thought nothing of his reaction. "I am the Prince of Changyang Commandery, Mutipo. I am greatly in His Majesty's favor these days. If you're willing to come with me, from now on you'll receive only the best of food and apparel. You'll be honored and live in splendor. You needn't stay in such a crude place." Only then did Shen Qiao sigh. "CHEN GONG, did you tell him where I was?" CHEN GONG was miserable, but he forged ahead. "I had no choice. If I didn't bring him here, I'd have to go to work as a beast of burden for Commandery Prince Mu." Shen Qiao shook his head. "Then you should ask this Prince of Changyang Commandery whether he's willing to let you go." Mutipo laughed. "That's right. Though this kid can't compare to even a finger on your hand. But he's whole and he's healthy and his mind's agile. His face isn't bad either. He's good enough to be a servant." CHEN GONG was stunned. "You said you'd let me go!" Mutipo paid the boy no heed at all. At the wave of his hand, his attendant stepped forward and grabbed CHEN GONG. Meanwhile, Mutipo approached Shen Qiao. Perhaps, sensing his approach, Shen Qiao finally stood, supporting himself with the edge of the table. It almost looked as if he was about to bow to the county prince in greeting. A smile tugged upon the corner of Mutipo's mouth. All was going as expected. In the face of power and influence, no one could escape their fear or envy. The fearful trembled in trepidation, while the envious were drawn as moths to a flame. Even if a man seemed reluctant now, he would soon be accustomed to the riches and wealth, the allure of women, and even come to love them. Even if he wanted out someday, by that point, it wouldn't be up to him. "What is your name?" asked Mutipo. "My name is Shen Qiao." "Qiao? As in Da Chao or Zhao Chao? A rather fitting name. Zhao as in the mountain peak." Mutipo raised an eyebrow and smiled. "As in the 100 gods does he placate, the peaks and rivers all come to partake? This Chao is a little harsh, not a fitting name for a beauty." Shen Qiao did not return his smile. "I think it's a good name." Fine, as long as you like it. Do you have a courtesy name? Or shall I call you Zhao Chao or Ah Chao?" Mutipo was smiling as he spoke, his tone doting and gracious. Shen Qiao bent to pick up the bamboo cane, and as he did, his collar drooped to reveal a glimpse of his neck, snow white and slender, enough to elicit fanciful thoughts. "This is all! I can tell why they changed it in the Donghua, because, this is interesting." The Zhao Chao refers to the two Chaos of Jiangdong, famed for their extraordinary beauty. The Da and Zhao prefixes here denote the elder and younger sister, respectively. Meanwhile, the 100 gods does he placate, the peaks and rivers all come to partake, is recorded in the Shijing. It was written for King Wu of Zhou as he offered sacrifices to the gods of nature. The verse in question exalts the king's kind-hearted magnanimity. A Zhao is a very tall, very precipitous mountain peak, hence Mutipo's remark. And then courtesy name, when men and women come of age, they are received a new name for others of the same generation refer to them by. Continuing to use the original given name instead would be rude and over-familiar. An itch spread in Mutipo's heart. He couldn't resist reaching out to touch him. He wanted to pull that man into his arms, to draw them intimately together. Shen Qiao's body temperature was on the low side and he'd lost weight due to his illness. When Mutipo grabbed his wrist, he could feel the bones protruding beneath the thin skin. On any other day, given Mutipo's high standards for beauty, he would have written Shen Qiao off, saying he felt too bony to hold. But today, Mutipo's heart jolted with eager impatience. "Ah, Chow," that was all he said. And that was all he had time to say. For just then, Mutipo felt a pain in his chest. He looked down. The bamboo cane had somehow gotten in front of him and jabbed right into the spot above his heart. Mutipo reacted quickly. After the pain, he leaned his torso back smoothly, and one of his hands moved to grab the cane while the other struck out at Shen Qiao. He wasn't a forgiving person, and that this fragile, harmless-looking beauty had the cheek to attack him was unawares, made him all the more furious. The blow he struck was merciless. Mutipo was also a martial arts master. Even though his level was only second or third rate, if he really hit Shen Qiao with a palm strike, it would seriously injure him, if not kill him outright. However, in an unexpected turn of events, the cane Mutipo had gripped so securely slipped nimbly out of his hand and out of his control. Not only that, his striking hand failed to connect. This man, he thought, a sickly beauty, had evaded the attack using extraordinary footwork, and even countered it by hitting Mutipo's waist with his cane. Shen Qiao had no internal energy, so he couldn't seriously injure Mutipo. But the blow caught him right at the weakest point in his ribs. Taken by surprise, Mutipo didn't use his true chi to shield himself, so the hit was painful. So painful that tears came to his eyes. He cried out involuntarily and quickly stepped away. Only then did the retinue of attendants pull themselves together. Some came forward to support Mutipo, while others swarmed around Shen Qiao, ready to take him down. Mutipo never thought he'd suffer such humiliation. His face grew stormy, dark, and violent. He glared viciously at Shen Qiao, naked rage shining in his eyes. He'd already thought up 100 ways to torture him. Capture him alive! The attendants Mutipo brought with him didn't lack for skill. Secure in their superior numbers, they weren't taking this blind, sickly man seriously at all. But each and every one of them was met with defeat. With just one bamboo cane, he held them all at bay. And that wasn't all. Shen Qiao seemed to know that Mutipo's party was large in number, for he wasted no time. His attacks became increasingly ruthless. His face, normally so delicate, froze over with a layer of cold severity. One man tried to circle around and seize him from behind. He was immediately smacked away by the cane, since staggering back several paces. Merciless, Shen Qiao followed up by shoving him straight out the window. Screams drifted from 2 floors down. The crowd of men grew fearful, and for a moment they forgot to move. Anyone else want to try? Shen Qiao's face was inscrutable as he seemed to watch them. With a light tap, he set the end of his cane onto the floor and stood, firm and immovable. Though his complexion was still pale, a faint, forbidding chill had settled over it. CHEN GONG was dumbfounded. When he'd watched Shen Qiao bait back the beggars, they'd still been in the broken-down temple. He'd known that Shen Qiao was probably a martial arts expert back then when he lost his memory and fell ill, but after that, he'd seen the likes of Yang Wushi and Zhu fight, and he thought it was his view was more broadened, and he didn't think Shen Qiao was particularly powerful anymore. Until just then, CHEN GONG thought he'd glimpsed many of the secrets that this man held, but it seemed he was still in the dark, completely clueless. I love it. I love how this is written. Mutipo felt humiliated. He was furious with Shen Qiao, and he was frustrated by him. One moment he wanted to kill the man, but the next he felt like killing him wouldn't be enough. He'd have to catch him alive, take him away, fuck him 8 or 10 times, and then toss him to his subordinates and let them play with him until he died. Only then would his rage and his heart be relieved. Oh my! He looked left and right, seeing the hesitation on everyone's face and their reluctance to move. There's so many of you, and you can't defeat one blind man. If nothing else, you can crush him to death with the weight of your bodies, he cursed. Still, his men hesitated, mainly because they'd been cowed by the fight and were all nursing some injury or another. None of them had thought that Shen Qiao could use a bamboo cane to do such damage. Shen Qiao's expression was indifferent. He stood there without speaking and seemed to be waiting for them to either leave or continue their provocations. Mutipo sneered. You didn't use any internal energy. You will be able to hold on for so long with only clever tricks. My men have surrounded the inn. If you're sensible, you'll kneel down obediently and beg for mercy. I might still give you a way out. Otherwise what? Asked Shen Qiao. Mutipo's face turned savage. Otherwise! Before he could finish speaking, he saw Shen Qiao's palm strike out sideways. They were shocked. They all thought that Shen Qiao had no internal energy. His strike whipped up an air current, blowing the cabinet right over. Startled, they were forced to evade. Mutipo was right nearby the cabinet and nowhere to retreat, but could only dodge to the side. Shen Qiao took advantage of this movement to strike Mutipo in the back. Mutipo immediately counterattacked, but he'd fallen right into Shen Qiao's trap. With a furl of his sleeve, Shen Qiao snagged his wrist and pulled Mutipo to the window. He wrapped his other hand around the commandery prince's throat. When the men saw this, they dared not move. Mutipo was appalled by the power that this thin, bony wrist had. It choked him, squeezing him until he couldn't breathe, and the other hand clamped hard over his gate of life, so he was too afraid to use his true chi. If you do this, he gasped and coughed, only bring about your death. After playing the hawk for so long, Mutipo never thought he'd have his eyes pecked out by a true raptor. Oh my God, this writing! He was half mad with rage, but too afraid to make any sudden movements. But who could have anticipated it? Despite Shen Qiao's appearance, he'd still made complete fools of them all. Whether or not it'll bring about my death, I do not know, but I do know that if you don't let me leave here today, you'll die first. Shen Qiao's voice was calm and quiet, not a spark of anger in it at all. Occasionally, it was even broken by a slight cough. In exchange for my own insignificant life, I'd take the life of your excellency? That's a fantastic deal. How on earth had he judged so poorly? Mutipo had actually thought this man was harmless and weak. With no way out, Mutipo had no choice but to tell his glaring attendants to stand down. Oh, go outside and tell them all the withdrawal! Shen Qiao sighed. If only the commandery prince had been so cooperative earlier. Go, and please escort me outside the city and then call me for a carriage. What's the use of a carriage when you're blind? Mutipo sneered. Or do you want me to send you a coachman too? Oh, by the way, that one thing is a vital acupoint located on the back of one's back between the kidneys, serving as a source of their life force and true chi. Shen Qiao mused this over. Commandery Prince Mu has a good point. Please accompany for some time. Accompany me for some time. I'm sure the coachman wouldn't dare disobey. Mutipo fumed. And so they headed out together, and Mutipo was forced into the carriage. With the commandery prince present, the coachman dared not question. The carriage headed west, traveling for 2 days and a night until they approached the border with northern Zhou. Once he was sure Mutipo's entourage couldn't catch up with them, Shen Qiao finally let the coachman leave with the carriage. Then, with Mutipo as his hostage, he entered an inn close to the border in Yanshou County. He knocked the prince out castrated him to prevent him from harming others in the future, and then tossed him into a random room at the inn. Only when this was all done did Shen Qiao leave alone. Oh. Once outside of the inn, he headed briskly in the direction of the city gates. He made it only a couple of steps before he was forced to stop. He sought out an out-of-the-way, deserted alley corner and leaned against the wall. He was spent, exhausted, and couldn't hold himself up any longer. Bending over at the waist, he coughed up a large mouthful of blood. From behind him came the mocking sound of a laugh. Shen Qiao didn't need to look up to know who it was. He wiped away the blood from the corner of the mouth on his sleeve and then simply slid down the wall and sat. At some point, a man in blue had appeared. His face was handsome, his demeanor imperious. At the corners of his narrow eyes were a fine smattering of delicate lines that only served to lend him an inexpressible charm. Yan Wushi stood with his hands clasped behind him. At the sight of Shen Qiao's pale face, like a lamp that had run out of oil, he clicked his tongue. Even though you parted ways with CHEN GONG for his own safety, in the end your good intentions were met with betrayal. That Chen lad didn't want to end up Mu TIPO's exclusive property, so he sold you out. Well, how does it feel playing the good guy? Shen Qiao's chest was boiling over with nausea. He covered his mouth, sorely wishing to cough up more giant mouthfuls of blood. Maybe that would bring him relief. You're wrong. That night at Chuyun Temple, I was the one who read the scroll. And I'm the one who's literate, not CHEN GONG. Even if he had an extraordinary memory, good enough to memorize every line, he'd only know the words, not their meaning. If the Liyue Guild wanted to seek us out, they'd only target me. I parted ways with him so I wouldn't get him tangled in my problems. If he met some misfortune because of me, my conscience wouldn't be able to bear it. After his long speech, his strength was flagging, forcing him to pause. He gasped down a couple of breaths and then continued. I can't predict the future. I couldn't have known he'd encountered Mu TIPO, and couldn't have known he'd bring trouble to my door in order to save himself. But even if I had known, I couldn't take it out on him. Not with a clean conscience. Oh, bitch. Oh, bitch. So we're on page 143. It says I'm supposed to go. Well, but it says, okay, it does say page 142. Okay. All right, so we're here. Oh my gosh. Why is it that every time we stop these damn chapters, we're right where we come back to Wushi? Oh my gosh. Well, that twist was so much that I had to get up out of my seat. And I have a feeling we're going to have lots more of those as we go. The thing is, I don't know how long this story feels. It feels very different reading this story with you all than it does like in the past when I've done Scum Villain and basically all the MXTX works, right? Because those are the others I've read on this channel with you all. Because right now we are still at the point where things are very similar to how they've been in the Donghua with some changes that we're going to talk about with Whiteboard Kun here. So I was like, oh my gosh. What a wild world. What a wild world. We're going to talk a little bit about Shen Qiao. And him, CHEN GONG, for sure. And the little bits and pieces that we've got that are a little different and expanded upon from what we know from the Donghua. So there's that. I do have two notes. I went back before starting this. I got Whiteboard Kun ready, and I also watched audio drama episode 3, which thank you, Treasure Chest subs, for getting that all together. Good job on you. With the audio drama, I only have two notes. One, I'm very upset because when they have the previews don't have English subtitles. So I don't know what's coming in the episodes to come. And the other note is, y'all, Shen Qiao's voice actor does a lot of panting and a lot of sighing and a lot of breathiness in that episode, episode 3. And all I can say is after what this chapter set has given us, I'm like, oh, buddy, when we get to possibly spicier things later on, that's going to be my ears. I don't know how that's going to work. We may have to record my reaction to those scenes. We may have to record that. That may have to come down the road because I have a feeling I was getting Whiteboard Kun ready and looking at the subtitles and listening, and I was like, this is interesting. I feel like the girl with the Coke can in front of her laptop. You don't say. So lots of things happened. And yet I felt like we didn't move very far. I've been trying to complain. I've been trying not to complain, to compare. There's nothing to complain about. This is great. The story is great. I've been trying to compare where we've been in the Donghua to where we are in the novel to kind of give me an idea of, okay, volume 1, we are technically, with this chapter set, we are halfway through volume 1, which is wild times. Because I have volume 1 split into 6 weeks worth of content. And so we're halfway through volume 1. Yay, rah. So, I did have on here, I have my pages wrote wrong. I've got everything corrected now. It was to page 142, and then next week we'll be doing, this week we only did 11, 12, 13, 14. We only did 4 chapters this week, which 4 chapters they were indeed. Next week there are 6 chapters though, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So next week is going to be, whereas we only had 40 pages to get through this week, we're going to have like 50 pages next week. So that's going to be a fun time. A fun time indeed. Romania's going to need some time to prep for that one. But so we shall see what happens. But we're just starting to get into the good stuff. And man, to bookend these chapters with first running into Yan Wushi in Chunyan Temple, and then Shen Qiao up against a wall, coughing up blood, and Yan Wushi's like, how's it going? Like, to bookend the chapters with him it's so poetic, and I love it, but at the same time, it's so frustrating, because I like Yan Wushi. Yan Wushi's character fascinates me, but Shen Qiao is fascinating me a lot in this novel, too, so that's fun. But Yan Wushi fascinates me so much, and I always love seeing him. He's so much fun to read, because his lines are just so smarmy, and there's his characterization in the novel, I feel like the Donghua creators were Yan Wushi fans. And they knew Yan Wushi from down towards the end of the novel. And so they were characterizing him in the Donghua with a little more of that end of novel flair. Because he's a lot colder in the novel right now than he is in the Donghua. And they have him appear much more often and sooner in the Donghua than he is in the novel. In the novel, he just does things and then he leaves. Now, is he stalking Shen Qiao behind the scenes the entire time? Yeah, clearly, as we've seen by the end of this chapter set, but he's not going to tell us, and the novel's not going to let us know yet either, so that's interesting. That's interesting indeed. So, let's just go through and talk about each of these chapters. Chapter 11 is just everybody all at once, and essentially Yan Wushi getting I want to call it the celerity, because the Donghua calls it the celerity, and the celerity is easier to say than the Zhu Yang strategy. It's shorter, more to the point. So in any case, we have found out, like, and also they, instead of calling him, I'm used to him being, the subtitles saying the abbot, calling him Abbot Zhu Ting. Here they just call him monk, like the Buddhist monk, Buddhist master Zhu Ting, but it's essentially Zhu Ting. It's XT Zhu Ting as we go. And he shows up. So I want to go up here and find the section, yes, where we talk about Tao Han Jing. So the volumes of the celerity were created, as we know from last week, by Xiao Hongting. And there are 5 volumes, and they all have a name. That's something new. We get the names of all of them. So we have Conscious Mind. We have Conscious Mind. The second one, we have Corrupted Anima, which I think is kind of cool. Corrupted Anima. Then we have Lost Soul. That's cool. Lost Soul. Then we have Clouded Essence. Clouded Essence. And then we have a Deluded Thought. Now, Deluded Thought is the one that we have found at the Chunyan Temple. That's the one that they've come across. That's the one that we've discovered. So Deluded Thought is off the books. The question, of course, is one of the 4 that are remaining are the ones that we've not run into, and the others have been discovered in other places. So one of the questions that I have is, I'm assuming at some point we're going to find out which book went with which one. It would be interesting if Lost Soul was the last book that was, that was kind of away, but I don't know if it will be or not. So we're going to have to figure out which books went with which ones, right? Because they don't exactly tell us. What we do find out is that the 5 volumes talk about the 5 phases and correspond, buddy, no, to the vital organs of the human body. So it says, for a detailed explanation of the rationale behind the Zhuyong strategy, please see the special glossary entry for Taoist cultivation, the Zhuyong strategy, and the power of 5. I don't want to look at those yet because I feel like there are spoilers. The mods can be happy. Tell me if I'm too soon to look at those. I feel like it's too soon. But yeah, they're a fusion of 3 schools of thought, a book of legends. So 3 volumes have been located. I'm so mad they won't tell us which volume is at which location. I'm so mad they won't tell us that. Dang it. I want to know. So anyway, we now have 1 has been read. We assume that maybe Shen Qiao has read another one, but we don't know for sure. We do find out that the abbot's read 2 of the volumes. I come to find out. I don't remember that from the Donghua, but apparently the abbot had read one at Mount Tiantai and one at the Northern Zhou. So Yan Wushi is very smart to point out that he's like, oh, Abbot, Zhu Tang, you think that you're so holier than thou and above thee, but we all know you're gathered here to get the celerity for yourself. So let's not beat around the bush. I appreciate that Yan Wushi is just like, he calls out all the BS, lays it out on the table, and then if you try to like argue with him, he's like, oh yeah, I'm taking it for myself, obviously. Like, he's very open to admitting that, And I appreciate that about his character. I really do. So we also find out that essentially, because Yan Wushi is all about finding someone as powerful as Qi Fengge to battle for himself. But we learn that even if you just had one volume of the 5 and absorbed that one volume and comprehended it all, you could be up to that level. So the idea he's trying to digivolve Shen Qiao by giving him all 5 possibly in the future is pretty crazy. He's like, hey, Shen Qiao, you, as we find out in the Donghua, he's like, you could be someone to rival Qi Fengge and even be stronger than him, and I really want to battle somebody like that, so how about I give you all 5 of these volumes and we just go from there. So I'm going to be curious to see, we've got diluted thought out of the way, we have these other 4, I'm going to be curious to see what we end up doing with that, and if they're going to tell us which books went with which area, whatever. I would assume Clouded Essence might be with Mount Zhandu, but I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work. But in any case, everything that goes down the Donghua with Yan Wushi getting the bamboo tube from the whole idea of Murong Chen transforming into a shadow is wild. That's crazy. And then Yan Wushi beating him to get access to the scroll from Yun Fuyi was really interesting to read. And then, of course, he gets Shen Qiao and CHEN GONG up on the roof, up on the pedestal there, like it was in Donghua. And then what's interesting is that when he gets up there, Yan Wushi gives Shen Qiao the scroll to read. And there's a moment here where they're like, okay, Bai Rong knows how Yan Wushi is unreasonable and the irrational steps that he would take. And I like how he calls the abbot a bald donkey. In the audio drama, he calls him bald ass, which is, an ass is a donkey. So he calls him bald ass in the audio drama, which is pretty funny. But here he calls him a bald donkey in the book translation. What is interesting to me is with Yan Wushi, he comes across as so cold. And just so cold, and he's evil and everything, because he's just read. And this note here in the book where Shen Qiao's Shen Qiao knew that Yan Wushi was using some sort of secret method to open his meridians. To everyone else, it looked like he was threatening him. What's interesting is that, in public and in front of Shen Qiao, he kind of mocks Shen Qiao. He kind of teases Shen Qiao. He doesn't seem interested in Shen Qiao. He immediately leaves. He immediately, right when it was done, he was like, okay, well, read the scroll, got that out of the way, deuces, bye, and leaves. But then we didn't get it in this chapter set, and it was not in the audio drama because I was paying attention to see if we saw him and Yan Xingyan together. But in the last week's set of chapters, when I listened to the audio drama, they cut to Yan telling Yan Wushi where he was like, hey, should we follow Shen Qiao and whatever, and how do you know where he's going to go? And Yan Wushi's like, oh, we'll find him. So, and in the Donghua, they show us constantly that behind the scenes, Yan Wushi always has tabs on Shen Qiao and is following him around because he's fascinated by him, right? So, from watching the Donghua and listening to the audio drama, it becomes clear that Yan Wushi is keeping tabs on Shen Qiao, watching him, and seeing what happens because he's fascinated with him. In the novel, he is very distant. In the novel at this point, we're halfway through the first volume, and Yan Wushi is not really, he doesn't seem like he's following or paying any attention to Shen Qiao until the end of this chapter set, until the end of chapter 14, where he finds him and he rattles off all the stuff about Shen Qiao, about CHEN GONG betraying Shen Qiao, and Shen Qiao's like, well, actually, no, he's fine. Up until that point, it appears as if Yan Wushi has had no attention towards Shen Qiao, doesn't care about him. He just used Shen Qiao in the temple to read the celerity volume because he was an outsider and it was the unbiased thing to do. But at the end of chapter 14, we come to find out that actually Yang Wushi has been following Shen Qiao around. Isn't that funny? Isn't that something? Why would he be doing that, Mr. I Don't Care? So, yeah. I'm really frustrated that we ended the chapter set here because I wanted to get more into that, and they didn't really get much more into that in the audio drama, so I was like, so now we gotta wait till next week, as one would. Grr. But yeah, so they have Shen Qiao read the celerity, and essentially it's the same that it was in the Donghua, talking about kidneys and spleens and everything, and everyone, of course, it's like freaking Willy Wonka, and so everybody's trying to write down what they can remember. And the interesting part that I hadn't really thought about until reading the novel, in the Donghua I didn't think much about it, but in the Donghua you kind of have to, is the fact that everyone writing down what they heard that night. Like, in the Donghua, it seemed that only Shen Qiao really read it and understood it and took it all in, which is still true in the novel. But in the Donghua, it almost seemed like the other characters had a harder time understanding and hearing what was going on. So, and it's kind of like that in the novel. They just have fragments and bits and pieces of what they heard and could take in and soak in and recall to write down. But it is interesting that the novel brings up the idea of everyone writing down little bits and pieces of the volume and then reselling them or getting them stolen. I hadn't thought about that, and that adds like a whole nother layer of stakes to Shen Qiao learning all of this, because everybody else just has little bits and pieces they're writing down. Shen Qiao is literally becoming the encyclopedia, you know? So that's kind of cool. That's an interesting thought to think about. I still think Yun Fuyi is the same as she is in the Donghua. I like that she offers a spot for them in the party, but Shen Qiao, of course, is like, we would be in a lot of danger if we did that because they're immediately going to try to use us. And Chen Gong calling Yun Fuyi a bitch immediately, I was like, but then again, he's only 16. That's kind of the thing. Something else I like as well in this, I'm going to mark these off as I go, and then cha-cha. One thing I like is talking about Chen Gong and his sort of journey that he's gone on, because in the Donghua, Chen Gong is around for a couple episodes and he follows Shen Qiao, and then they part ways after this moment, although the Donghua treats it very differently for reasons which we'll talk about. But in the Donghua, because we don't really get the exposition and the third person objective kind of perspective that you can only get when reading a novel, because we have to see it play out in the Donghua, and the audio drama does a good job of it too. It feels like we didn't have a lot of time with Chen Gong in the Donghua, and so his like attitude, and because of how they animate him where he looks a lot older than he actually is, it comes across as him just kind of being not as good of a person. But here in the novel, I feel like a lot of Chen Gong's reasoning is a lot more justified and a lot better explained, because one, he's 16. He's a kid. He is a kid. And two, he has only barely leapt out of Funing County. That country bumpkin has been nowhere and has not experienced the world and all of its beauties and cruelties. And he's very relatable, because I'm from a very rural area, and up until I was like in my 20s, I hadn't really left home or gone out of the county that I was from, unless it was like on a trip that my parents took me on or something. And even back then I was, playing Game Boy and not really paying attention to my surroundings, because I was a little nerdy kid. But I relate a lot to Chen Gong, and I see a lot of students that I coach now on the team that I coach, where they're 18 or so. And some of them, like we went to a restaurant a while back, and that student, and it was a fairly common restaurant, not like a fast food restaurant. It was a sit down restaurant, and it wasn't one that was really in our area, but it was in some surrounding cities. But that student was like, I've never been to one of these before. And I was like, and just that perspective, so seeing Chen Gong in his perspective, like when he calls Fun Yui a bitch, it's like, or Yun Fuyi a bitch, it's like, well, that's because he's 16 and he's just being reactive in the moment, and Shen Qiao has to kind of calm him down. But then you get to the part where Shen Qiao is, they look at Bai Rong and what happened with the temple monks and the old abbot, And I really liked how the novel kind of showed Qin Gong's reaction to that. Like, Qin Gong has a reaction of seeing Bai Rong killing these people, and he's very kind of moved by it. And he's like, oh, this is bad. Like, this is dangerous. This woman could really hurt us. And I'm glad the novel kind of focuses on that, because then when they meet Bai Rong in the intro in the novel, when she finally, isn't in her monk disguise and she comes, forward to them, I like that Qin Gong is apprehensive of her, because in the Donghua, she kind of like, subdues them a little bit, but she uses like her little flirtatious spell or whatever. And Qin Gong kind of gets, it seems like Qin Gong is wooed by it, but I like that the novel is like, no, he's not wooed. He's apprehensive of her. So speaking of which, we get into the novel here. I want to get into this picture of our sweet Bai Rong, just like in the digital file. I like her Donghua appearance so much that this is really nice. I like the outfit and everything. I like the sheer cloth and everything. She looks so good in the Donghua. I will say though, this drawing of Qin Gong I like this artist who has illustrated the novel, which is, the illustrations are by Mimo. I like the way you drew Qin Gong. He looks great. Mimo, you did a great job drawing Qin Gong. And Bai Rong looks amazing too. I just really like the Donghua version of her. But yeah, Qin Gong looks so 16, looks very precocious, but also he looks kind of attractive, which will play in part with Mu TIPO later. But yeah, he looks great. And so they encounter her. I feel like her encounter in the Donghua was longer, and I feel like, again, to circumvent the censors, she was much more flirty with Shen Qiao and flirty for longer. Maybe that's just my memory. She's had several encounters with him, so it could be I'm thinking of a different encounter. But in the Donghua, she starts to, they do make the line. They do have the line of when she's encountered that, find this line here, chapter 13, a dangerous encounter, many dangerous encounters, but she says, what businesses maiden seek? I like that she calls herself Little Peony. I will call her Bai Rong, but Little Peony is really cute. But yeah, this line here that was like, the line she says, like, you'll get whatever you wish for. It was enough to make any man's heart waver. Well, Qin Gong's heart was going to waver until he remembered that she killed those guys, and he was like, ooh, nope, dangerous. Shen Qiao, what's interesting is that we don't immediately go back to Shen Qiao after that is said, but his heart is clearly not wavered. So it's like, is this hint number one that Shen Qiao is not to be wooed by feminine wiles? Maybe. So in any case, the interaction with her is pretty short in the novel, because then Huo shows up, and I forgot that he showed up in this point, and I don't like Huo, so I'm glad that we won't have to deal with him for long. Huo's ability is very scary, and it's gross, the idea of fusing someone's face onto your own to make yourself youthful. Don't like that. So I'm glad we don't have to deal with him for very long in this series, but I was like, ugh, not fun. So yeah. And then while the two of them are fighting, that's when Qin Gong and Shen Qiao kind of make their escape. So I also want to point out that it's interesting that we start to see with Qin Gong as well some of Shen Qiao's influence. Like back in last week's chapter set, it was a big deal for them to go to a hotel, because Qin Gong complained the whole time. He's like, we don't got any money. It's going to cost too much. You got to pay me back. Like, where's my food? Da, da, da. Here, Qin Gong's like, okay, let's check into the inn. Let's get ready. Let's go. We're good, right? And it's so subtle, but the changes in his character from just those little bit of time together with Shen Qiao has already shown itself. And it's so interesting to me, because if you look back on Qin Gong in chapter 5, like in that chapter, or chapter 5 or 6 when we first met him, that version of Qin Gong is so less mature than the one that we have in these chapters. Even when he's still making mistakes, even when he's still like, being like, actually, I'm going to save myself, so Shen Qiao's really pretty. Even after that, his character has already changed so much, and that influence from Shen Qiao is so apparent. Like, Shen Qiao's kindness has made an effect, which I wish that was more, we see it from an audience perspective because we get to see like the 360 view of Chen Gong. We get to see a 360 view of him, so we get to fully realize how much he's changed over a short amount of time. Shen Qiao, because he not only doesn't have his sight, which is a big part of it, but also because of, he's not fully aware of what we, the audience, are aware of. I felt like at the end when Shen Qiao is up against the wall and Yang Wushi's like, well, you were betrayed even after all you did. It would have been nice for Shen Qiao to know what we, the audience, know about how much influence he has actually had on Chen Gong and how much he has helped him. And so, it almost helps the audience to root for Shen Qiao when we're like, oh no, he'll be fine. Like, he is influencing people in good ways and he is having an effect. And Yang Wushi, you aren't seeing the full picture that we're seeing. So even though you're eavesdropping on everything he's doing. So I really liked that. I liked that. It was very subtle, but it was a cool little note of his influence. So this part here is about the same as it is in the Donghua, but Shen Qiao, like when Chen Gong wakes up after having his nightmare, Shen Qiao comes in and he's been away and he's like, hey, let's part ways today. And I am curious because they don't really, we don't go anywhere from that. He just comes in and says, let's part ways. And it's almost like, okay, what is Shen Qiao planning? What did he do when he left the room? What did he go do? We don't know. They keep us in mystery about that if they're going to tell us, right? And so they talk about it and Shen Qiao's like, look, if we stay together, then there's a very good chance that we're going to be easily spotted because they know of us as two travelers. If we split up, we're less conspicuous because they'd be like, why would they part ways? And we weren't going to stay together anyway. You were going to leave once you got to this place. I was going to leave to go to Mount Zhandu. He's like, I think this is just the better way to do. And I like the way that the novel talks about how Chen Gong is sad about that. He's actually really sad and, doesn't like the fact that Shen Qiao is going away. He's come to really like his company. And he's just like, yeah, I guess I've got lots of chances for the future and I'll go do these things. Like, he's saying it with a lot of enthusiasm. One thing about the writing, too, that I am noticing is that as I'm reading a sentence, I'll read it one way. And then immediately after I read it, the sentence will be like, actually, this is how you're supposed to say it. And I'm like, ah! So that is something I need to prepare myself for at moving forward because that is the author's style. Also, this book is so well written. It is so well written. I talked last week about how verbose it is because it's a lot of words. This book is so well written. There were several lines in this book that I was like, in this chapter set, I was like, oh, I like that. Oh, I like how that's written. I like how that sounds. Like the translator has done an amazing job translating this work so far. But the writing is just top notch. Really like the writing in this. It's really great. The descriptions are really nice. You can instantly, it's like, it's cutting down my discussion time. Well, I've already discussed for 26 minutes, but I feel like it's going to cut down my discussion time a little bit because it's very well explained. You don't have to question a lot of things. They come right out and they're very forward in what it's saying. And I'm like, there's things to still be mysterious about, but I'm like, damn, this is a really well written story. Now this part here, where it says shortly after Chen Gong left, Shen Qiao packed his clothes and prepared to leave the city. He had picked the south gate as to not bump into Shen Gong. The two of them were going separate ways, made each one less of a target, but Shen Qiao had other reasons as well. Here's the thing. The whole thing about Shen Qiao, like, he stayed there another half a day, almost as if he was planning on Chen Gong coming back, which I don't think he actually was, but it almost feels like it. But we don't know what Shen Qiao has planned, and there is some mystery, like, what were his other reasons? We don't know. The creator of the story, the narration, is telling us things, but also keeping us kind of in suspense, being like, yeah, Shen Qiao, it's keeping Shen Qiao and Yang Wushi very mysterious when they're not together. When they're not together, they are very mysterious. We don't get a full idea of what either of them, we don't know at all what Yang Wushi is thinking, but we don't get an idea of what Shen Qiao is thinking as well, which is fascinating to me, that these two characters are kept kind of in the dark, right? So, Mu TIPO, that guy from the series with the little hat and the short man, okay. Let's dive into this. So it starts out very much like the Donghua, where Chen Gong goes his separate ways, and as he's going to the Huai province close to Zhou, that's when he goes to a certain point at the gates and accidentally becomes part of a people hunting expedition where people or commoners or servants are taken and they're set free, and these men that are part of Mu TIPO's entourage hunts them down with bows and arrows, which is, it was giving me a lot of Moriarty the Patriot vibes, but it also was disgusting. I was like, hunting people down with bows and arrows, it was giving me Game of Thrones, it was giving Moriarty the Patriot, it was not giving great vibes at all with his entourage, his pit crew that he's taken with him. But you know what? I was like, I wrote on here on Whiteboard Coon, let's let Shen Qiao and Yang Wushi be our good representations of Don Mai men-on-men relationships, because Mu TIPO is not a great representation of that at all. At all! So, this got really interesting, because, so Mu TIPO, we come to find out, in the Donghua, as soon as Mu TIPO finds Chen Gong prostrates himself before Mu TIPO and is like, I'll do anything you want, and I'll do anything that you have. And Mu TIPO's like, okay. And he's like, I know a guy that has a lot of wealth, and aka the celerity, and points him towards Shen Qiao, and that's how it goes. And it flowed very well in the Donghua. Here, Mu TIPO takes a shine towards Chen Gong because he thinks he'd make a good male concubine. Now, there is a part of me that in Qi, where they're talking about the generations of Qi emperors that had taken both men and women as partners, I was like, okay, way to be progressive. Glad that we are celebrating the bisexuality. Glad that we're into it, the pansexuality of it all. Glad that we are being open-minded about our sexual partners. Cool beans. But then there was another part of me that was like, does this story frame that in a positive light, or frame that as something that the villains are doing? And I don't know how to feel about that. I feel like it could go either way. I mean, let's be honest, the end of the story is going to have Yang Wushi and Shen Qiao essentially get together, more than likely, so it's going to paint that as a positive. But it is interesting in this point because, I mean, to be fair, Chen Gong does not seem interested in, the same sex to get with. So that is all in his prerogative to be a heterosexual. Like, no one should force that upon anybody. Nobody should force something non-consensually onto them. So I felt bad for Chen Gong in that moment. And then he's just like, Shen Qiao's beautiful, you should go hang out with him. And I like the entourage is like more beautiful than us. And it's like, which I'm like, is the entourage consensual about all this? Are they following Mu TIPO because they're afraid for their life? Or are they genuinely like totally cool being in this like multi-husband relationship? I don't know. But I don't know how to take what the vibe around this is, if they're phrasing Qi's, if they're phrasing Qi having male and female concubines as a good thing, or if they're framing it as being not a good thing. I'm assuming it's framed as a good thing, but which is fine because later in the story, I feel like that's going to come up, but curious. So Chen Gong was not aware that he had gained the eye of Mu TIPO, and then convinces Mu TIPO that I can take you to somebody that's really, really nice. Now, look, I like that the entourage calls him a hillbilly and, like, makes fun of him because he's a hick, and it's like, oh, no, poor Chen Gong. Mu TIPO wanting to have concubines of both sexes, cool, fine. The problem then becomes as soon as he finds out that Shen Qiao is blind, he's like, oh, I've never had a blind one before. And then it's like, oh, yeah, he's a villain. Never mind. He's taking it down a bad route, down a dark route, which I don't know if they're setting it up, having Mu TIPO come in and be this character, and it's framed kind of in a negative way. But then later on, when we have it between Shen Qiao and Yang Wushi, it's going to be framed as a positive thing. I'm going to be curious to see how they do that. I'm going to be curious to see what they do with that. But yeah, so he goes to Shen Qiao with CHEN GONG leading the way. And then, God, the line he says that he's like, when I tie him up to the bed, I don't have to blindfold him. I'm like, that's crazy. That's crazy. And then the sickly man, when he's like, well, if I mess with him and he dies, it's not my problem. That's crazy, y'all. So he takes him to Shen Qiao. It's pretty much how he goes back, which I remember in the Donghua, they came back to the hotel room and he was still there. And I'm like, why are you still here? I was like, I thought you were leaving. I thought you had stuff to do. What are we doing here? But no. So he was there. And then this whole chapter of all of the guys coming in and fighting him with the bamboo cane, like, this chapter was so well written. I was like, I also like the idea that, I know in the Donghua, the clothing is different, but the idea that Yang Wushi wears blue, like, I assume it's like navy or dark blue. And then you have Shen Qiao, who's in like sky blue, like two blues, just different shades. It's kind of cute. Also, he doesn't have a jade hairpin. So Shen Qiao, your very wealthy, luxurious future boyfriend needs to get you a jade hairpin. I'm sure he has several. That needs to happen, please. I need him to have a hairpin by the end of this story because he needs it. So yeah, Mu TIPO introduces himself, and then chapter 14, Betrayal, is just such a good chapter. So crazy. The fact that he makes fun of Shen Qiao's name is the fight. Let's get into it. The fact that he makes fun of Shen Qiao's name, he doesn't make fun of it, but he just like points out the meaning of it. And he's like, you know, it's a harsh name, not fitting for a beauty. And Shen Qiao's like, I think it's a good name. And I was like, the shade, which also I kind of get this vibe from Shen Qiao that is similar to Shi Lian from Heaven Official's Blessing, where he is a beauty. He's very beautiful, a pretty boy to look at, but he also kind of likes his masculinity. He likes who he is. He likes his masculinity. He does not think of himself as feminine. So when Mu TIPO says, well, you just need a prettier name, he's like, no, this one's good. It's like, although, damn Shen Qiao has an icy bite. An icy bite. He is a snowman with jagged, sharp razor teeth. Let me tell you. Because the bamboo cane with his slender wrists, like just taking him and the other guys out. Also, the fact that Mu TIPO said, ah, chow. The moment he said that, I was like, that is not for you to say, sir. That is for Yang Wushi. That is for Yang Wushi to say, not you. So, I'm going to be curious if Yang Wushi says, ah, chow, and how Shen Qiao reacts to that. Because when Mu TIPO said it, he got bumped in the chest by the bamboo pole. As he should. So that's going to be interesting to see. But the fight was so good. And it was without him using any chi at all. He was just using that bamboo pole. And when he like knocks the guys out the window and he looks to the other guys, he's like, anybody else want to try? I could see why Yang Wushi would want him to come over to the dark side. I could see why he would, because he's very... Shen Qiao appears on the outside to be this, like, innocent angel, but he's got some morally gray, like, edges to him that the novel slowly brings out. I'm kind of like, okay, all right, I'm here for it. But yeah, so Mu TIPO, I was reading it and I was getting into it. And when he gets so humiliated and he said he wanted to take him away and screw him 8 or 10 times, I was like, oh my gosh. Like the way that this author writes like that rage it was something. It was something, right? So anyway, they finally reach a end point of the battle and Shen Qiao is like, he holds him at the window and he's like, all right, look, if you don't want to die, then what we're going to do is you're going to get me a carriage and we're going to go to wherever I want to go to and you're going to ride in the carriage with me. And that way nobody questions it because, you know, you have such affluence, you know. The thing that's kind of crazy is that Shen Qiao leaves with him in the carriage, and they just, I guess, leave CHEN GONG there at the inn where they were left at. In the Donghua, they go in the carriage and they get to a certain point, but CHEN GONG is there. He's in the carriage with them. So when all is said and done, CHEN GONG and TIPO kind of like leave together, which in this novel, I can't imagine all. I'd be like, no, don't leave with him. But then Donghua, they do. So I guess in this, CHEN GONG was just left at the inn, and Shen Qiao was like, I'm going to take him and we're going to go. But there's not any, nothing is ever, there's no resolution with CHEN GONG and Shen Qiao, so we're just kind of left hanging on when they'll ever see each other again, so that's interesting. But what got me was in the Donghua, they go out into the middle of the woods, kind of like Seven style, and then Shen Qiao leaves and TIPO's left like out in the middle of nowhere. In this, in the novel, he gets to an inn once they get like 2 days out down the road, goes to an inn close to the Yansho County border, knocks the prince out, knocks TIPO out, and castrates him. Chops that wee off so that he can't harm anybody in the future, and tosses him into a random room. And only when all this was done did Shen Qiao leave alone. I mean, he didn't kill him. In the audio drama, he says, I'm not going to kill you. Which we were like, aw. And he's like, but I'm going to keep you from harming anybody or having any kids. It's like, and he just takes it off. Boop. Which, I mean, he's not a nice person. And does he deserve it? Well, yeah, it's crazy in my head to think of Shen Qiao, precious little angel being Shen Qiao, just being like, whack it off. It's like, crazy. And then when he heads outside the inn, he makes it to the city gates and makes it a couple steps and then stops and sits down on the ground, coughing up all of this blood. And then who happens to show up? Why? And this is the thing. Do we think for a hot second that Yang Wushi just happened to be in the area 2 days away from where they once were, and then just happened to stumble upon Shen Qiao at that exact moment after he did all of his business? Do we think that's a happenstance? No. The novel doesn't explain it, but Yang Wushi has clearly been following Shen Qiao and keeping tabs on him, and now that they have this moment alone, he confronts him about it, and he's like, oh, hey. I also absolutely love the description where he says his face was handsome, his demeanor imperious. At the corner of his narrow eyes were a fine smattering of delicate lines that only served to lend him an inexpressible charm. Like his crow's feet. The little smattering of fine lines. His crow's feet. I'm like, that's so freaking cool. I love that. I love the way that that's worded. But yeah! So good! So good! So he stands up there and he's like, even though you parted way with Shen Qiao for your own safety, you ended up, your good intentions were met with betrayal. And Shen Qiao, as he's coughing up blood, he's like, no. He's like, Shen Qiao, he's like, CHEN GONG. He's like, it's not, if I had known that TIPO would have been the person he would have met, that would have changed things. He's like, but I couldn't have known that. He's like, I actually put him in danger by parting ways, so it's kind of my fault. And he takes the brunt of it. He's like, I can't predict the future. I could have known he'd encounter TIPO, and I couldn't have known that he'd bring trouble to my door to save himself. But even if I had known, I couldn't take it out on him, not with a clean conscience. So, again, now we start the whole Yang Wushi, don't you want to go ape shit? Aren't you mad? One of the things, why you mad? And Shen Qiao's like, I'm not mad. It happens for a reason, So we've started this little conflict between them. And just as we're starting the conversation, the chapter is over. So, I'm so frustrated about it. Okay. So I will have to take a little bit of a break on my channel because of travel with my team that I coach. I will have to take a bit of a break. I'm so sorry it's going to be a little bit of a long break, but please check my April update video for April 2026 if you want to see how that goes. Those of you that watch this way in advance, it won't matter. So you'll be able to go right into part 4. But I am sad I'm going to have to take a few weeks off just to get travel done and everything, but I am so excited we're getting to this part. Not that there's anything, I love Chen Gong. Chen Gong in the novel has been so great, and I've really enjoyed reading through his perspective and getting more into his character, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm really excited about Yang Wushi being here, and I'm really excited about getting to this, and this little difference was crazy. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts about the change down below. Holy cow. Your thoughts about everything, what you think about these chapters. Y'all, this was crazy good, but you'll have lots of time to catch up, and then we will get back into it when I get back from traveling to do part 4. So, and we're going to be looking at chapters 15 through 20, pages 142 to 192. Going to be a big set for next week, or for not next week, but for the next installment. So I hope y'all are ready. But in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of Thousand Autumns. Bye.